It started as a dream job on the happiest ship on Earth. Rebecca Coriam, a 24-year-old youth counselor from England, had landed a coveted position aboard the Disney Wonder, sailing the Pacific, working with children, living a life that looked perfect from the outside. But before dawn on March 22, 2011, everything changed. A CCTV camera captured Rebecca pacing in a crew corridor, visibly upset, speaking on an internal phone. A colleague walked by and asked if she was all right. She nodded faintly. "Yeah, fine." A moment later, she walked out of frame and was never seen again. No witnesses, no distress call, no confirmed trace of her ever surfaced. Explanations were offered. None of them satisfied everyone. In the years since, Rebecca's disappearance has become one of the most disturbing mysteries in cruise ship history. A case that raised serious questions about jurisdiction at sea, corporate responsibility, and what really happens when someone goes missing on international waters. She was young, vibrant, and seemingly full of plans. So how does a person vanish from a floating city without a trace? Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we unravel the disappearance of Rebecca Coriam, what we know, what we don't, and what most likely happened. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there. Rebecca Coriam was born on March 11, 1987 in Chester, England. From an early age, she stood out. A bright, outdoorsy, energetic child who poured her heart into helping others. She loved sports, thrived in the Air Cadets, and was deeply attached to her family. Her mother, Anne, later described her daughter as someone who just loved life, children, Disney, and America. She studied sports science and youth studies in university with a clear goal: working with young people. That dream began to take shape in 2010 when she was hired by Disney Cruise Line after a competitive application process. After training at Disney World in Florida, Rebecca was posted to the Disney Wonder, one of the company's 4 cruise ships at the time. She spent her first 4 months working Bahamas routes, and in late 2010 she joined a new itinerary out of Los Angeles, week-long voyages down Mexico's Pacific coast. On board, she worked as a youth counselor in the ship's Oceaneer Club. Colleagues described her as charismatic, witty, and playful. She was always zapping around everywhere, very mischievous, one friend recalled. By early 2011, she had signed a new contract and was looking forward to a vacation back home in April. She had even planned a surprise trip to Disneyland Paris for her family. Everything, by all outward signs, was going well. On March 21, 2011, the Disney Wonder left port in Los Angeles. Its 7-day cruise would take passengers to Cabo San Lucas and Puerto Vallarta, with several days at sea in between. That Monday was a day off for Rebecca, and she spent it relaxing and socializing with friends on the ship. According to one crew member, she was in great form that evening. Around 11 p.m., she was joking with friends, lying across her crewmate's lap in the crew lounge, and laughing as she tried to peel off another's false eyelashes. But the lightheartedness masked deeper emotional turbulence. In the days leading up to the cruise, Rebecca had been navigating a difficult relationship. She was romantically involved with another female crew member, Tracy Medley. Their connection was described as intense and passionate, but also volatile. On the night of March 21st, Rebecca, Tracy, and a third person, a male friend who had previously dated Tracy, reportedly spent the night together. While consensual, the encounter left Rebecca feeling hurt. According to several people who spoke to her that night, she seemed unsettled in the hours that followed. Sometime between 5 and 6 a.m. the next morning, March 22nd, Rebecca left her cabin and went to an internal crew area. At 5:45 a.m., security footage captured her on an internal phone in a staff corridor. She appeared visibly distressed, wearing baggy clothes, reportedly borrowed from a friend, and pacing back and forth. A male crew member walked by, briefly stopping to ask if she was okay. Rebecca tucked her hands into her pockets, pushed her hair behind her ears, and replied, "Yeah, fine." She gave a faint smile, then ended the call. Moments later, she walked out of frame. That's the last confirmed sighting of Rebecca Coriam. By 9 a.m., she hadn't shown up for her scheduled shift in the youth club. Her absence was noted, and ship officers attempted to page her over the public address system. When she didn't respond, they began a quiet but thorough search of the ship, starting with her cabin, the gym, dining areas, and crew lounges. There was no trace. Her bed hadn't been slept in. Her breakfast tray sat untouched outside her cabin door. Her uniform wasn't in the laundry, as it typically would be before a shift. Most curiously, her keycard hadn't been used since the night before. By mid-afternoon, the crew escalated the matter, and authorities were contacted. The U.S. Coast Guard and Mexican Navy launched search operations along the Wanda's sailing path. If Rebecca had fallen overboard in the early morning hours, she could be adrift or worse. But the sea yielded no clues. No clothing, no body, no signs of life. On board, the captain made a formal announcement to passengers that a crew member was missing. The tone on the ship turned somber. At the Coriam family home in Chester, the phone rang just before midnight UK time. On the line was a Disney representative, calling to inform Mike and Dan Coriam that their daughter had not reported for work and could not be located on board. The family was stunned. Within hours, Disney had arranged travel for them to fly to Los Angeles, where the ship was due to dock on March 25th. Under maritime law, the investigation of any incident at sea falls under the jurisdiction of the nation where the ship is registered. The Disney Wanda, like many cruise ships, sails under a Bahamian flag. Accordingly, on March 24th, a single officer, Superintendent Paul Roll of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, was assigned to the case. Disney flew Roll to Los Angeles by private jet. When the ship arrived, he spent one day aboard, conducting a handful of interviews with crew. He spoke to no passengers and left the ship shortly thereafter. Rebecca's parents were dismayed by what they later called a perfunctory investigation. When the Wanda docked in Los Angeles, the Coriams were escorted on board through a back entrance, away from disembarking passengers. Disney officials brought them to a meeting with Captain Henry Thurston and Superintendent Roll. There they were shown the short CCTV clip of Rebecca on the phone. According to Anne, the clip did not match the level of distress the crew had described. They also briefly met the woman Rebecca had spoken to on the phone, who said Rebecca had calmed down by the end of their conversation and had planned to return to her cabin. Later, Captain Thurston walked the family to the Deck 5 crew pool, a small restricted access area near the bow of the ship. He explained his belief that Rebecca had been swept overboard by a freak wave sometime after 6 a.m. As possible evidence, the captain presented a single pink flip-flop that had been found near the pool. But Mike and Dan immediately noticed it didn't match their daughter's style or even her shoe size. A name and cabin number, someone else's, was written on the sole. They quietly rejected the implication. On March 26th, just one day after docking, the Wanda departed again with a new group of passengers. A brief memorial was held on board. Flowers were placed near the crew pool on Deck 5, with no public statement about why that location had been chosen. Crew members said the gesture only deepened confusion. They put these flowers down, but refused to answer any questions, one said. It really stirred things up. Back in England, the Coriam family waited for updates that never came. Weeks passed, then months. The Bahamian officer assigned to the case did not contact them again. In May 2011, a potential lead emerged when Rebecca's bank reported a failed login attempt on her account, almost a month after she disappeared. Then, in September, a family member noticed her Facebook password had been changed. And in March 2012, just before the one-year anniversary, a tourist in Venice contacted the family, claiming she had seen a woman who looked like Rebecca in a square, walking with a man. None of these leads led anywhere conclusive. Frustrated by the silence from investigators, the Coriams began speaking out. They launched a website, held fundraisers, and joined forces with other families of missing cruise passengers to demand better protections and more transparent investigations. In October 2011, they met with UK lawmakers to push for new rules on cruise ship safety. Their local MP, Stephen Mosley, raised the issue in the House of Commons, criticising the investigation and pointing to systemic failures. It seems Disney was more interested in getting the ship back to sea, he said in a public statement. The next day, The Guardian published an exposé titled Lost at Sea, written by journalist John Ronson, who had gone undercover aboard the Disney Wonder. His reporting revealed tensions among the crew, rumours of suppressed evidence, and a growing belief among many on board that Rebecca's disappearance hadn't been fully explained. In the years that followed, the Coriam family continued their search for answers. In 2015, they filed a lawsuit against Disney in the United States, alleging negligence. The case was quietly settled out of court the following year, with no details disclosed. Around the same time, they hired former Scotland Yard commander Roy Ram to independently review the evidence. Ram raised concerns about inconsistencies in the CCTV footage, the handling of Rebecca's personal belongings, and possible physical evidence, including a torn pair of shorts found among her returned possessions. Despite repeated requests, Disney has never released the full security footage from the ship that morning. The company has said little publicly about the case, aside from confirming the initial details and asserting that a thorough investigation was conducted by the proper authorities. As of today, no official cause of death has ever been determined. Rebecca Coriam remains missing. When someone disappears without a trace from a cruise ship, explanations tend to come quickly, sometimes too quickly. In the case of Rebecca Coriam, the theories began surfacing within hours of her vanishing, and they haven't stopped since. Official statements offered one version, crew members whispered another. Family members had their own suspicions. Investigators, both official and private, proposed competing hypotheses, each more unsettling than the last. Over time, 5 primary theories have emerged. Each tells a different story. Each carries its own assumptions and implications. And each comes with its own set of unanswered questions. Number 1. Rogue wave, freak accident. The official explanation given to Rebecca's family was simple. A freak wave, hitting at the wrong moment, swept her off the ship. This became Disney's stated position, that sometime around sunrise, Rebecca may have stepped out to Deck 5 and been struck by an unexpected force of nature. But the core issue with this theory is that it relies on an event no one saw and no evidence supports. Weather data from that morning showed calm seas and no storms in the area. Maritime safety experts pointed out that for a wave to breach the 6-foot-high steel wall surrounding the crew pool, it would need to be extraordinary, possibly in the range of 90 feet tall. No such wave was reported by the bridge crew or recorded in logs. There was no alert, no water damage, no broken equipment. In support of the theory, officers presented a single pink flip-flop found near the pool, implied to be Rebecca's. But the shoe was too small, not her style, and clearly labelled with someone else's cabin number. For many familiar with the case, the rogue wave story feels like a neat explanation that avoids liability. a way to attribute her disappearance to nature rather than human failure. They needed an answer, one crew member said later, and that one doesn't point fingers. Number 2. Deliberate disappearance. New identity theory. Another early suggestion, particularly during the initial search, was that Rebecca had chosen to disappear. That she left of her own will, intending to start a new life elsewhere. This idea gained traction when, nearly a month after her disappearance, an attempted login to her bank account was flagged. Then, several months later, her Facebook password appeared to have been changed. Most striking of all, a tourist claimed to have seen a woman matching Rebecca's description in Venice, Italy, walking through a square with a dark-haired man. She said she was 85% sure it was her. To Rebecca's family, still clinging to hope, these hints were hard to ignore. Maybe she got off the ship and said at the time. Maybe she's hiding. Maybe she found herself in some kind of danger and thought this was the only way out. But despite initial optimism, the theory fell apart under scrutiny. The Disney Wonder did not dock at any ports between the time Rebecca was last seen and when she was discovered missing. It was a full day at sea. All crew and passengers were required to use ID cards to disembark at future ports, and Rebecca's card was left behind in her cabin. Her passport and all personal identification remained untouched. The Venice sighting was never confirmed. The Facebook and bank activity, when investigated further, were inconclusive, possibly the result of hacking or even hoaxes. And even if she had somehow left the ship, surviving a jump at sea, getting picked up, and establishing a new life without contacting anyone close to her, that would require a level of planning and coordination no evidence has supported. Over time, this theory faded, less because it was impossible, and more because it required too many coincidences. As months turned into years, even Rebecca's family began to let go of this version of events. Number 3. Decision to end it. One of the most quietly circulated explanations, first among Disney personnel, later in media interviews, is that Rebecca may have jumped willingly. It's an uncomfortable theory, but one that some who knew her on board have entertained. Tracy Medley, her girlfriend at the time, later said Rebecca had been very depressed in the 2 weeks leading up to her disappearance. She described a conversation where Rebecca reportedly confided that she had thought about ending things in the past, but didn't go through with it. She said she felt weak for not doing it, Tracy recalled in a later interview. Tracy also shared that on the night of March 21st, after the encounter that left Rebecca hurt, she had asked Tracy to walk with her in the early morning hours. When Tracy declined, assuming Rebecca just needed space, Rebecca left alone. The CCTV footage taken at 5:45 a.m. shows her on the internal phone, visibly distraught, pacing and crying. Some Disney officials reportedly described her as agitated or even out of control, at one point suggesting she had been seen banging her head against a wall. Her family disputes that entirely, saying the footage showed nothing of the sort. Still, the possibility lingers. Rebecca was athletic and could have scaled the railings on Deck 5. No one saw her go overboard, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Cruise ships rarely have full surveillance of all outer decks, especially in the early morning hours. Her family strongly rejects this idea. She had plans, she had things to look forward to, her father Mike said. She wouldn't have done that. Friends back home echo this sentiment. But others, especially some who worked alongside her, recall moments where Rebecca's bright exterior masked deeper emotions. She was bubbly, yeah, one said, but you could tell sometimes, underneath it all, she was carrying something. This theory remains one of the most divisive, not because it lacks plausibility, but because the emotional consequences of accepting it are so difficult. Number 4. Misadventure, accidental fall. This theory separates itself from the idea of deliberate action. Instead, it suggests that Rebecca, upset, perhaps fatigued, perhaps seeking solitude, went to a quiet outdoor area and accidentally fell overboard. The crew pool on Deck 5 was one of her favorite places. Friends described it as the spot where she went to clear her head. "We used to sneak out there," one colleague recalled. "You could see the sunrise. It was peaceful," another said. She loved that deck. Some believe she may have climbed up to sit on the wall, either to think, to feel the breeze, or simply to be alone. "I can see her doing that," said one friend. "She liked a thrill. She didn't scare easy." If that's what happened, a slip, a gust of wind, or a jolt from the ship's movement could have been enough to cause her to fall. Others note that the area was sometimes off limits during high winds. And that morning, conditions were breezy. It was so windy that week, the pool was closed sometimes, one former crew member wrote anonymously. It's possible she wasn't supposed to be there, and if so, there might have been no patrols or monitoring. This scenario avoids more complex assumptions. No perpetrator, no conspiracy, and aligns with the lack of direct evidence of foul play. But it doesn't explain everything. If this happened, why wasn't it caught on camera? And if it was, why hasn't that footage been released? There are rumors among crew that more surveillance exists. One claimed there was a second tape showing what happened, but that Disney buried it. Others say no such footage exists, that the cameras were either turned off or pointed the wrong way. For now, the theory remains both possible and painfully unresolved. Number 5. Foul play. The most disturbing theory, and the one most often mentioned by those closest to Rebecca, is that she may have been the victim of a crime. This idea comes in different forms: that someone attacked her, that there was a confrontation on Deck 5, that she discovered something she shouldn't have, that someone on board, crew or passenger, had a reason to silence her. There are fragments that feed this version: Rebecca's torn shorts, return to her family among her belongings, raised questions. Private investigator Roy Ram believed the damage was inconsistent with regular wear. They looked like there had been a struggle, he said. There are also stories from other crew members. One claimed a Disney security officer had once confided, off the record, that a young woman had been raped and thrown overboard. Another said they were warned not to speak about the incident at all. "It didn't happen. That's what I was told." Rebecca's credit card was missing. Her keycard hadn't been used since the night before. If someone had followed her or confronted her, perhaps in an area without cameras, it's possible a crime took place and was concealed. The lack of a proper investigation only fuels suspicion. The Bahamian officer assigned to the case left after a single day. Disney resumed its crew schedule less than 48 hours later. No forensic sweep was done. No one was questioned under oath. And yet, for all the concern, no physical evidence has surfaced to confirm foul play. No blood, no witness, no camera showing another person with her. For Rebecca's father, that's part of the problem. People don't just vanish, he said. And if she was attacked, someone knows. These are the stories told about what happened on March 22nd, 2011. Each one fills a void left by the official record, a record that remains incomplete to this day. But of all these theories, one requires the fewest leaps of logic. One matches the physical environment, the emotional context, and the tragic silence that followed. We'll explore that next, by looking not just at what's been said, but what the evidence quietly suggests. We've already seen how Rebecca Coriam was last captured on CCTV around 5:45 a.m., pacing near a crew phone, visibly distressed. She told a passing colleague she was fine, then walked away. No one saw her again. What likely followed wasn't recorded or hasn't been made public, but the available facts suggest a chain of events that was neither violent nor deliberate, but tragically accidental. We remember that Rebecca often sought solitude on Deck 5, the crew's private outdoor area at the front of the ship. Friends described it as her favorite spot to think, to vent, or just to watch the sea. That quiet part of the Disney wonder, isolated in the early morning hours, offered peace. It also offered risk. As noted earlier, the steel walls surrounding the crew pool were tall but climbable, especially for someone athletic like Rebecca. The deck is partially shielded, but open to the elements. Crew members recalled that it was windy that week, enough that the area had reportedly been closed at times. If Rebecca went there that morning, alone and emotionally raw, even a momentary loss of balance could have been fatal. There's no sign anyone else was with her. No conflicting keycard use, no audio reports of distress, no direct visual evidence placing another person near her after the phone call. All indications suggest she was alone. And we've already seen that her keycard and ID were never used again, her cabin untouched. That window between 5:45 a.m. and the crew's first search was wide enough for someone to vanish from the outer deck without being noticed. From that height, some 50 to 70 feet above the waterline, falling overboard would have been catastrophic. If the fall didn't render her unconscious, the wake and current behind the ship would have carried her away within seconds. And with no overboard detection system in place, no one would have known. The Wonder continued at cruising speed. By the time anyone realized she was missing, hours had passed. This scenario, a misstep, not a decision, matches what we know without requiring what we don't. There's no need to assume an extreme weather event that didn't happen, a perpetrator no one saw, or a staged disappearance with no preparation. It's not the most sensational theory, it's just the most plausible. And if it's true, it also explains why so many of the ship's actions afterwards seemed calculated. We've already seen how Rebecca's belongings were returned to her family without forensic review, how a flip-flop that wasn't hers was presented as possible evidence, how the family was brought aboard quietly, away from other passengers. These details speak not to foul play, but to liability. If Rebecca died because she was in an area that should have been closed, or where safety procedures weren't enforced, the company's exposure would be enormous. So rather than confront that possibility, the response became, control the narrative, move on. The idea that Rebecca did it willingly has never sat right with her family, and this theory doesn't require it. We remember that she had plans, a vacation, her sister's wedding, a surprise trip to Disneyland Paris. Even in her distress, she was still engaged with life. It's entirely possible that she climbed the railing not to jump, but to breathe, to sit, to think, and that she lost her balance before she could change her mind or step back. It may not bring peace, but it brings coherence. What most likely happened is this. Rebecca Coriam, feeling overwhelmed, went to a place that gave her comfort. The early morning wind, the sway of the ship, and the lack of barriers between her and the sea made for a deadly combination. No one was there to stop her. No system was in place to detect it. And by the time anyone realized, she was gone. That moment, small, private, and irreversible, changed everything.